Sea of Thieves is now over 3 years old, and by this time in a game's life cycle, many developers would have ended the rollout of updates and focused elsewhere. This open world pirate multiplayer is however very different, with its biggest update so far coming out in June this year. This has brought new life to the game, but is it enough to make it worth buying or returning to? Find out in this 2021 review. Sea of Thieves is an online-focused pirate multiplayer set in a vast open world where campaign and multiplayer elements occur simultaneously, and this means that when it comes to gameplay, it's incredibly unique. While you can play the game solo, it's significantly better with friends, and it's very obvious that the game was made this way. When it comes to ships, for instance, there are 3 options of different sizes, going from the 1 or 2 man sloop to the absolutely vast galleon, which is going to require at least 3 players to effectively sail. The ships are actually a significant part of the gameplay as they're designed to provoke teamwork through elements such as the anchor, which will raise faster with more people, or the galleon, which has multiple sails, all of which need to be adjusted individually for maximum sailing efficiency. This means that even during long travel times there's always something to do or coordinate with your team, which really adds to the entertainment factor and stops you getting bored on those long journeys. Navigation is a similar story. Unlike many other open world games, you can't just highlight a location and have a marker floating in the sky. You'll have to use maps and compasses, which again adds to the immersion factor while also provoking teamwork and giving you yet another thing to do. The fun really starts when you meet other players though. The combat system is an interesting one because everybody has access to the exact same weapon selection. There are 3 main guns, which are basically a shotgun, a pistol and a sniper, all of which are competitively exactly the same, i.e. your shotgun is going to be exactly the same as everyone else's shotgun. The guns are usually how fights end though, as before that you can take some shots on the cannons, try boarding by jumping off your mast, or straight up ramming them. The damage system on ships has actually been implemented really well too. Depending on the projectile used, damage can be done to the hull and sails at many different levels. Some of the most frantic and chaotic moments will entail one person bailing out water, another repairing the hull while someone else raises a collapsed mast, all in an effort not to sink while fighting 4 other players. This is another instance where playing with friends will be just so much more enjoyable, but it also gives you a competitive advantage, depending on who your friends are of course. To fix damage you'll likely need wood, which is an example of the pretty well executed resource system. Before every voyage you'll spawn at an outpost island, and around this area you'll find resources. I recommend you stock up, as this is another element that I've really come to like about the game, because the more resources you have, the better prepared you'll be. If, for instance, you run out of cannonballs mid-fight, you might be screwed. If you run out of wood mid-fight, you're probably screwed, and if you run out of food mid-fight, then you are 100% screwed. You can, however, stop off at other islands all around the place where barrels containing these items can be found, or you can buy stuff with in-game credits, which means you can just do what I did and take advantage of your rich friend. Now I mentioned the mixing of multiplayer and campaign elements at the beginning of the video, and it's actually a pretty big part of the game, so here's some more on that. Sea of Thieves deals with the campaign side of things through its tall tales. These are short stories, each about 2 to 3 hours in length, which consist of a small string of missions to achieve an end goal, which eventually builds up to a finale. The delivery of the stories from the NPCs certainly isn't too great, and in a few cases neither are the backstories behind the missions themselves. As of the recent Pirates Life update, 5 new tall tales were added in a really cool crossover with Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean. These tales are certainly the best so far, and while they do still suffer from bad backstory delivery and some sort of an element of repetitiveness, the level design, new enemies, bosses and vast amount of side quests makes them well worth playing. The crossover elements with Captain Jack Sparrow and other characters from the movies is also a really nice touch, and this was the first time I felt the game delivered a character that had been given some real depth, like what you'd expect to see in a game where the campaign is its focus.
I believe that now is the perfect time to use these cannons.
Across all the tall tales though, the gameplay experience is the highlight, which makes up for the questionable and sometimes motiveless stories in many of them. There are, for instance, an abundance of puzzle elements along the way, and the level design must also be given credit, as in many of the tales there are some really fun and unique levels, which incorporate parkour, traps, problem solving and the effective use of your resources. This makes them great fun to play through with friends, and the strong co-op is another factor that really makes them worth playing. However, I should mention that they can all be completed solo too. Now, the co-op within these campaigns is of course one aspect of the multiplayer crossover. However, don't forget that while you're progressing through each story, you're still in a public game with up to 20 other players. This can add even more variety into each mission, as you'll likely bump into others along the way, whether they are friend or foe. So the Tall Tales are definitely a positive addition to the game, especially those most recent 5. However, where Sea of Thieves really does fall down is through its progression system. Because of the multiplayer crossing over with the campaign, weapons, ships and character ability is the same for everyone, and it will probably be like that forever. Now, there is a reason behind this decision, because if players could upgrade things for a tactical advantage, then while the campaign elements would still work, the multiplayer would be completely broken, and since the story and PvP elements coexist in the same servers, there's no easy way of splitting them. Instead, the progression is measured through cosmetics, status, skill and campaign development. These 4 things work to a point, however just not to the extent that upgrades of guns and ships possibly could have. Now, when you first start playing the game, you won't have to worry about this. However, eventually you get to a point where you're not completely sure what your next goal is, as your progression seems somewhat abstract. Now, some attempts have at least been made to improve the experience for long-term players, with the addition of a Battle Pass system rewarding those who play the game the most, and the Pirate Legend status works in a similar way by letting players who get to a certain level unlock exclusive cosmetics. Something else well worth mentioning is the map. The Sea of Thieves is ever expanding and now has over 100 islands for you to navigate and explore. The map size is really good too, as it's absolutely big enough to completely immerse you within the game world, while not being so big as to make travel time unreasonable or reduce the quality of all the islands, which is also pretty solid by the way. Across the 4 distinct sections of the map, there are unique characteristics and features, going from your typical tropical islands in one corner to highly active volcanoes in another. This leads on nicely to another feature of the game world which I came to love, and that's just how alive it is. There is of course a day-night system, however you'll also encounter storms, fog, erupting volcanoes, and maybe even an earthquake if you're lucky. Or unlucky. The graphics are also really nice. I've come to appreciate and enjoy the more simple art style of Sea of Thieves, because while realistic graphics would be the ultimate, the more cartoony style fits the casual gameplay very well. I've played on both console and PC, and while PC max graphics is unbeatable, the game still looks great on the Xbox. The only sign of hardware limitation is within the number of players per lobby. Currently there are only 5 or 6 other ships per server, which for me at least was a bit disappointing. It's certainly nice to be left alone sometimes, but I often couldn't help but wish that there were more players around. Now, while this is probably down to the limitations of the Xbox consoles, it's something that could come in an update, so I guess we'll have to just wait and see on that one. Overall, Sea of Thieves is really quite a unique game, with its combination of gameplay types mixing with its simple mechanics, making for an experience that, to be honest, is best summed up as simply being just a lot of fun. Its less serious approach to multiplayer and its segmented campaign makes it a really nice game to play casually, especially with friends, as playing it with people you know just makes it infinitely more enjoyable. It certainly has its flaws though, with the lackluster progression system hurting its long-term playability, and the poor solo experience also has this effect. I do however believe that this is completely outweighed by what it does well, because especially after the Pirate's Life update there is some seriously good content to be devoured by you and your crew. So then, Sea of Thieves is well worth buying, as long as you can convince a friend or two to buy it with you. Even if you already have the game, then it's definitely worth going back to for the new Tall Tales, because they are the best so far by a long shot. Anyway, that's all for this video. If you have enjoyed it or found it useful, then a like or even a sub would be absolutely amazing. But that's everything, so thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.